Hey gang, Dr. Lee here. So today's video I'm going to talk about kids, because one of the things that I get a lot of questions about from parents or just out in the public or from different comments is, at what point can I bring my kids in? Like that there's this idea that, there's an age cutoff that might be inappropriate for children to get adjusted, and then a time at which it might be more appropriate. And the short version of it is, the sooner that you can get your kids in, the better off we're going to improve their chances of living a healthy life. Whether they have issues right now or they don't have any issues, it doesn't matter, because they really need to be checked. We're a very reactionary society where we look at health when it comes down to things that are falling apart, and we're expressing symptoms, right? Suddenly, like, oh my gosh, I got to check something because I'm having a fever, and then you look into it. Or you're having digestive problems for an extended period of time, and all of a sudden now you're like, oh well, I better take my vitamins or do this or do that. We do things after we experience problems. With kids, a lot of kids are having problems that their parents don't even realize are problems. Right? A lot of behavioral stuff, right? Kids acting out, kids being squirmy. We think that that's normal for kids, and it's really a sign that their bodies are not able to just sit still, right? Human beings, maybe as an adult, you're not sitting still. You can't even hold your body in that space of awareness, so you don't, expect that out of your children. But kids are dealing with a lot more stressors than we ever had to. Right, the foods that kids are eating are way worse quality of foods than even just a generation ago. The amount of chemicals and pesticides and chemical residues that are on the food, and the amount of genetically modified organisms now that we're consuming that have little bits of DNA from all sorts of different types of bacteria to sea life. They're literally infusing that into our crops, and we're eating that. We're literally tinkering with the genetics of God's food that we've been given, and we are somehow assuming that it doesn't have consequences. Well, we're finding out that the consequences are huge, and then we're also more toxic in the air that we're breathing. Right, the pesticides that are being sprayed, the chemicals that are being sprayed, the smog that's in the atmosphere, the paints that are on the wall have off-gassing chemicals. Your mattress, just every cleaning solution has toxic effects on the body, and so these chemical stress loads are through the roof right now for these kids. Let alone the vaccine schedule has just gone ridiculous. And so kids are now getting these toxic substances that are literally going directly into their bodies, and now their body has to deal with that as an insult as well. So today's kids are just being bombarded with different stressors, and then the amount of physical stress, and now they're looking down. I mean, how many parents have a hard time keeping their kids off of their phones or their tablets, because from the time that they're basically one, they're able to do this, and they're looking down, and they're on their phone, they're on a tablet. They're putting so much stress and tension on their neck that we're seeing abnormal curvatures developing so young that before I was always reluctant to want to x-ray kids, because they're like, there's no real reason. And now we're seeing the early stages of arthritis starting to build up in kids as young as 7-8 years old, which means their entire life has had abnormal pressure and their body has not been able to adapt. So getting kids checked as soon as possible is of paramount importance if you want to give your kids that healthy start in life, so that these symptoms, which are starting from birth, or the stressors that are starting from birth that are stacking up over the course of years, you can get ahead of that. You can get on top of that. So things like behavioral disorders, ADHD, autism now that is on an epidemic rise, that we're just kind of as a society pretending is not existing right now, but it's a huge issue. It's a very alarming, huge issue with the behavioral disorders, the whole autism spectrum. It's going crazy right now. It's a real issue. So we get these kids in our office, we get them checked, and it's really just amazing to see the changes. One, it's alarming to see what they're starting with, but the changes are remarkable. The kids just start finding a better balance. They're more centered. They're suddenly going from being constipated to having normal digestive problems. They're going from having severe bedwetting issues to not having bedwetting issues anymore, or to a much, much lesser degree in a very short period of time. They are the growing pains. Growing pains are not normal. That starts to improve, and that starts to go away. Their mental clarity starts to improve, like their attentiveness to the parents and listening, their ability to not act out behavior wise. I mean, that's just such a huge one for kids, and that I see parents struggling with on a pretty regular basis here. So when we get these kids checked and we get them adjusted, and the adjustments are not scary, they're not we adjust kids as young as a day old, like within hours after birth. And a kid that small, of course we're going to do things differently. We use usually I'll use my pinky or the tip of my finger, and I use as much pressure as you're checking like a tomato to see if it's ripe or not. Very, very little pressure, because bones are not skeletally mature yet. They're not formed. So what we do with kids when they're young is going to be different than adults. And even adults, if you know what we do, the technique that we use is extremely gentle. We use this tool right here. That is the torque release tool, which is called the integrator, and it is fast, specific, and what it does is it allows the bones and everything to start to shift by addressing the nerves specifically. So we do the same concept with children. The younger the children, we don't have to use the tool, but we can address the nerves specifically so that they can start to get connected again to that inner source which heals, which is their innate intelligence that is being choked off when they have all these different stressors in their life and their body isn't able to adapt to them. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Is just the importance of getting kids checked earlier the better. And if you have any questions, reach out, jump into this, because it's so important for not only you to get taken care of, but to set up your kids who are going to have problems earlier than you did. If you're experiencing issues, that's just the state of the events that we're in right now, because we're in such a toxic world that really needs to be healed, and that starts with our kids.